All right, we're live. Welcome everyone to Table Talk, where we talk all things tabletop. I'm your host, the Bella Gamer, with my co-host Glue Boy.
Hello.
And today, I promise it's not gonna be the whole stream. We're gonna talk a little bit more about Legend in the Mist, but only in reference to the topic today, which is our stats and ability score is kind of dumb.
I saw the subject and immediately thought, oh boy, Legend in the Mist.
It's just crazy how much I've been learning about tabletop in general just from this one game, because in many ways it directly confronts like much of what I understood about tabletop and kind of like upends it. But we'll get to that in a little bit. We'll wait for some people to come in, so we're just gonna have a little bit of small talk. So hey Alex, what's up?
Yeah, well, those of you will notice in the next handful of Table Talk streams, I will be gone. I'm going to be out of town. I'm going on vacation. So literally, it's the next 2 Table Talks I will not be here for. I'll be back in the country, for the next Table Talk. That's for the 16th, but I'm gonna be fucked and jet lagged. Because I need a day to recover because I have to go back to work Friday. And I don't know the time difference because I'm going to Ireland. I'm going to look at castles, I'm going to drink. That's kind of all I'm gonna be doing.
I think it's like 8 hours.
Oh man, that's rough.
8 or 7 hours.
I just know that it's one of those situations where I'm gonna we basically get to Ireland because of time difference, the same day we leave. Or we leave from our airport, so
yeah.
It's one of those bits where I don't know if for all of you who've done a bunch of long distance travel, where you're looking at the tracker and the time isn't really changing. Because it's just the wild time difference, because it's a 10-hour flight to Amsterdam and then a carryover. But yeah, because of that, I put out a video today on Werewolf the Apocalypse, a big overview video. Thought that's fun, something to pull some people, keep them chatting, keep them talking. I'm happy that the reception to it's been fun, because I'm glad I didn't make any weird mistakes in it, because I recorded the second half of that video completely fevered. Because it was on Tuesday, after our Legend of Mist game, a couple weeks ago, where I was like, man, my throat really hurts. The next day I woke up and I was fucked. I felt awful, and I was carried by Adderall. It's I need to just record something. I need to do this second half of the video, or I don't know. I feel I was I can't relax. I need to record it. I do it. I feel slightly delirious while making it. And then I woke up the next day unable to talk good. Because my uvula swelled up and was blocking my throat, and talking really hurt. And I was oh, thank fuck I recorded a day before this. Oh my god. So yeah, it's been that thing where, when you ever undertake a big project and then the universe kind of comes together to try to stop it. That's what it's felt like making the werewolf video, but I'm happy it's finally out.
Yeah, speaking on videos, I am getting so restless when it comes to making content. I miss being involved in the tabletop scene. And what's really kind of sad is I noticed that after I pretty much stopped making Pathfinder 2e content, Pathfinder 2e has gotten just so slow online, and it's something that it still was kind of going for a little bit, because I know the Tian Sha stuff, which I made content for, did pretty well, but there's just been not a lot of activity in the scene, I've noticed, and some of the bigger content creators also kind of petered off. So the Pathfinder 2e, I feel bad for Pathfinder 2e enjoyers, because there's just a lot of traction was lost. And I honestly, I can't name why. Like, I felt like it lost a lot of momentum after the Wrath of the Gods, or not Wrath of the Gods.
War of the Immortals.
War of the Immortals, there we go. I don't know why I can never remember the book. But they got some interesting stuff coming up. I know the Impossible Lands, or not the Impossible Lands, but the Impossible book comes out this year, which will be really good because that's the Necromancer and the Runesmith. And I'm not so sure about the Slayer and the Daredevil, to be honest.
I mean, if anything, it's the Daredevil that like I'm the most curious about, only because I'm really worried and curious how it's gonna be any way different from Swashbuckler. Like, I like the idea. It's a class that I probably will find myself playing because that's a character archetype I really enjoy. But like, mechanically speaking, what is it going to do differently?
Yeah, I don't know. It's getting really weird. Haven't gotten too much into the Starfinder. It just hasn't been like high on the priority list, and I have so little time in my days to just look into tabletop games. And now I've been obsessed with Legend in the Mist, as I keep talking about in these streams. So
everything I see with Starfinder, I'm like, I am really looking forward to it having more content, because like it feels like when you got the comparison of Starfinder Pathfinder right now, it kind of feels like Starfinder is a game where it's one of those games you let cook a little, because you look at the content difference, it's like, damn, it's really showing with like the amount of classes, like, especially the amount of classes that didn't make it to the core book jump between first and second edition. And there's a lot of really cool stuff that aren't in there yet. I haven't heard anything about Starfinder since the drop. I have no clue if they're putting something out. But like, everything I read about Starfinder looks really cool. Like, I really like how it works and like what it's doing. I want to try it at some point, but like, yeah, I want some of like more stuff for it, I guess.
yeah, well, and one of the interesting things about Starfinder is in the first edition of Starfinder, it was not a game as much about classes as it was about like different alien races. That was like a really big thing. Because as long as Starfinder has been out, it actually only had like a fraction of what Pathfinder ever had. But it had a billion races. Like, that was kind of the big thing, because I guess they really wanted to have the identity, you know, of like a massive spacefaring, you know, society. So I don't know if they're planning on going to do much more other than like the Technomancer and the other one. I can't remember what its name is at the moment. Also, if I'm a little addled, it's because I have a baby and she's working her way around the clock. She went to bed today at 10:30 a.m.
Jeez.
Yeah. Fortunately, my wife, who's also sick, was so gracious and watched her for me so I could get a few hours of sleep before stream. And I'll probably be going back to bed after stream. So
that's fair.
It's just my life, and I'm gonna be pretty much on 24-hour baby duty because, you know, we're just gonna be up when Suzanne is sleeping. So
yeah,
that's how it be. But I've been having a good time looking into Legend in the Mist and just the system in general, and my solo play has been really good. So solo play has been having multiple stories, just because I either mess up or I have a character die and then I just like restart. So
I finally completed the first little mission thing I made for my solo game, which has been fun. I need to generate whatever the next threat questal thing is, but the only bit It's like I didn't have any moments. I might need to, if anything, readjust the character because
Yeah.
I have some flaws where I'm like, I don't know how this will proc. Um, I mean, the only flaw I could see that come up for one of them is I have a flaw for in Origin Devotion that is essentially like if you are in a spot of trouble, they will cut you loose, like no loose ends. So I might have to just be more liberal with how I use that. The only one I've marked so far is I've made an arrogant character and he did something arrogant. Um, but essentially, I had the whole like Assassin's Creed fanfic I've been doing, and I had the whole thing of like, oh, this guy is trying to like lead a political uprising, and I was using the interpretive stuff. I killed him, and essentially I was like, oh, well, I can figure out is there more shit going on, uh, like anything fantastical, and then after like 5 or 6 little different checks throughout like a 2 different encounters, it's essentially hit like no, the situation's actually really complicated and nuanced, and it's a really tense political situation. Uh, Instead of like an evil plot, it is no, they're stoking legitimate political issues in the city because I rolled the same like peasant one you did
Yeah.
when we were setting this up. I rolled it again for like uh I was like, "Oh, I find a letter on the guy I kill. Like I'm going to take a peek at it. Um like is there any cool secrets like in here? Can I tell what the plot is?" And I rolled the peasants and I'm like, "Okay, so it's literally just exactly what I thought it was. Cool."
Yeah, it's funny how sometimes Interpreter Oracle kind of like justifies the story.
Yeah. It's basically like the two things that it threw me for a loop were the first one was it turned out in my little story that it really wants me to have a really political like nitty-gritty political game. And then the other bit was I went back, reported to my master in the order, and based off of just a couple rolls, turns out he's fucking super jealous of me being so cool in the order so young. So he's just all I've created a jealous prick as like a main NPC I have to chat with now.
Yeah, that's fun. I love uh in the solo play I'm currently doing, the very first mission I did was like I'm doing a kind of like a Japanese RPG style, like I'm in a guild, and my first mission it was supposed to be a really simple mission for my occult investigator guy, and I got teamed up with like this naive witch girl who is like new to adventuring and everything like that. And we went to go like someone was like possessed or something like that, and we had to go and like, or not like possessed, but he was like being haunted or something like that. So we went to this guy's house in the middle of the woods, and then we find that the house is empty. We hear a terrifying shriek in the woods, and we go and we see that like there's this evil spirit that's like really strong, and it was way above what we were expecting, and it used this like shriek ability. It's like a pre-made creature in the book, and I was able to resist it somewhat, but she could not, and so she just got knocked out of the fight immediately at the start. And then I got hit by its claws, and I kind of death spiraled and died. So I was like, well, I just started. This is the first fucking mission, so I'm just going to have my character revive. And so what happens is when you go to 6 limit in the game, and you're like, okay, I don't want my character to die. So the GM's like, okay, so this changes your character somehow. So I was resurrected, but I lost one of my themes. I lost my keen mind theme I had as my trait. And so my character's been kind of going through this like resurrection mental fog. But he's not super happy because like he felt like he kind of just got dicked over by having that newbie on the mission with him. who did absolutely nothing and ran away. And
that's fair. I think it's a fair feeling to have.
and then the next mission I've been sent on is I'm in a much larger group now, and we're investigating this noble's party. It's like a couple days in the future, and we're investigating. Like, there's been reports that someone's been like monitoring, and they're worried that it's going to get interrupted. So some adventurers have been kind of sent out to like investigate, and it's been very difficult for my character because he's an occult investigator, so he has at least the investigative part of an occult investigator, but he used to use his keen mind, and now he doesn't have that anymore, because of the resurrection, like brain fog. So it's been interesting for him, like going through this investigation and just kind of sucking, and it just makes him miserable.
Fair.
But there's like this rogue in the party who has been kind of like apathetic because they just dislike nobles. That was something I rolled, by the way. And so we've been just like chatting about stuff, and so we've been kind of like making this friendship. But yeah, that's the fun stuff about this, is like there's just a lot that can happen, and the interpreter oracle can just make things very interesting. Like my beginner mission, which was supposed to be really simple, I was like, oh yeah, I'm gonna get to know this witch girl, and maybe we'll become more close and friends over this like really easy mission. And then that did not work anywhere the way I thought it would.
Yeah.
So but that's the fun of it. But actually, this is a great time to start talking about the subject for today. Why are stats and attributes kind of dumb? So what made me think about this topic, and why I think it's very interesting, is in many TTRPGs, you have your core attributes like strength, intelligence, dexterity, which I hate dexterity most of the time because it's also agility, which are two very different skill sets being combined into one stat. And it got me thinking, in most TTRPGs, increasing your stats, your stats are not a major part of your character, but they also are. Because we'll use like Pathfinder as an example, and the same kind of applies to D&D. So in Pathfinder, if you're playing an intelligence-based class, your intelligence must be high, because all your major class features are essentially focused on it. Like, unless you're playing maybe an inventor can kind of get away with being a little dumb, because all it is like, if you're using the innovation weapon, then swinging weapon real good, even though you can use your intelligence for your like boost, you could just swing your weapon real good and only be like a little smart.
Yeah.
And if you're playing a martial class, then you want either strength or dex, because those are your to do damage stats, and then con, But each point in these stats confers to you a 5% accuracy for the things you're doing. 5%. One number on a D20. And when you start Pathfinder, ideally your core stat, you have a +4, which confers a pretty sizable +20% to do something, right? But that's +20% in comparison to someone who has 0 in that stat, which means that from a character who is supposedly, narratively in the game, supposed to be very smart, they're only 20% more likely than someone who's considered average to do a task.
Yeah.
Now, granted, these games, it's always compounded with what skills you have. You have skills, smart characters will have smart skills, which will broaden the gap at the starting level of the game. You will have probably trained proficiency in said skill, so that will give you +2 more, so that's 6 + 6 over, which is 30%, which again is substantial when you're talking about like mechanics, but narratively speaking, a character who is both really, really smarter than the average person, and also trained in a subject is only 30% more likely to succeed a check than someone who is untrained and kind of dumb.
Yeah, it's like as a point, stats and attributes and all that are always meant to be like a numerical uh a numerical representation of your skills, abilities, and how you are. And in practice, just having things be random chance always kind of sets up the fact that random chance be random, and like a random Joe Schmo might do something better than you. Because it's been that balance of like how much of tabletop do we try to make the legitimate representation of like a fictional thing, a world that we're in, versus like how much of this is gamey.
Yeah.
Because stats and numbers are very gamey. I mean, literally before stream, I got excited because there's a Hunter the Reckoning game that has stats and numbers, and it's going to be very RPG. Because we've kind of been missing that with the last World of Darkness game that came out. It was not an RPG at all. But like, it kind of sets it up so it just doesn't track the more you think about it and look about it. It's like, I think the better representation when it comes to a character's skills and abilities and how good they are at something is something like feats and abilities. Like, because yeah, sure, you have a really good like intelligence modifier, but how you actually utilize that intelligence modifier with actions other people can't really utilize as effectively or at all, I think is a more interesting representation of that.
Yeah.
Because there should be something that you can do. You're a master or just really skilled in a field that an average person could not achieve.
Yeah, or at least like not unless they were supremely lucky in the moment, you know, or had some kind of advantages.
Because like there's been a lot of moments where like as a normal person every once in a while like someone asks like, man, I wonder how this thing works, and in that moment, if we zoomed out to the tabletop game that's being played of our lives, maybe in that moment they rolled an intelligence check, I got a nat 20. Because I think we've all had those moments where, like, we just kind of spitball and just kind of say, like, I bet it's like this. And then you say it confidently enough, and it turns out you were completely right. And you're like, I have no clue how I accessed that information. I've never heard of this before in my life. I imagine that's just like a nat 20 for a Joe Schmo, but in tabletop, it always feels weird. It's the same thing we talked about a long time ago, the metaphor I really like of, the town locksmith not being numerically good at lockpicking.
Yeah, who has like a 20% fail chance at picking locks, so just like every 1 in 5 checks, you know.
Yeah, like, I don't think I have a
damn
20% fail chance at the job I do, and I also wouldn't even say I'm that good at my job. But like, I don't have a 20% chance of just fucking it up.
Right, yeah, and that's a substantial amount for like something you do regularly. And so like before anyone in the comments gets like super upset, I know why stats exist. I know the history. They were representative of wargaming, you know, back in the day, where a single point difference was actually a lot more substantial. THACO, the way that worked, single point differences were actually pretty substantial.
Oh yeah.
And
I mean, in all the war games I play, a single number is like really good.
Yeah.
Granted, a lot of those systems are usually D6 systems, but
right. And in addition to this as well, there used to be back in the day a lot more like statistical things tied to your stats, which still exist. Like for instance, characters' carry weight technically is determined by their strength, how much strength they have. In Anima Beyond Fantasy, there's a lot of derived stats and derived abilities based on how high your stats are. In a game that has hilariously bad stat bonuses, because in anima, on average, your highest stat is going to confer to you a plus 15, maybe a plus 20 in a D100 system, which is very, very small, way smaller than other tabletops. But your power score dictates how much starting Xeon you have, how much, what your base magic accumulation multiple is, which is very substantial, because a multiple of 5 versus 10 can give you a much better, or there's a big difference between the kinds of spells you can cast between those two stats. Your constitution gives you a pretty good scaling, like HP and regeneration in the system. And your character's dexterity and agility can determine how many actions you would get in combat, though relatively speaking in the game, it's a general character who has like at least a 6 in both is going to have more actions, quote unquote, that they can take than would be honestly necessary. So it's something where derived stats have kind of fallen off because the games have become simpler and a little bit less granular over time. Not all games, and there's a lot of games that have that still. But there was also this expectation that the characters that we play in these games are doing substantially difficult actions and are in many ways just people. So when you have these statistical differences that are kind of not like that significant, like a 30% extra chance, right? That was the idea, that you're only moderately better than someone else when it comes to certain kinds of things based on your experiences and stuff, but it makes you much more reliable when you roll the dice so frequently. And the types of things you're doing are things that are not meant to be succeeded all the time. You know, back in the day, Dungeons and Dragons was a dungeon crawling experience. So, you know,
because I'd imagine like the actual answer for our analogy or little like example of the town locksmith. I imagine it's more of the case of like, yeah, well, he wouldn't be rolling because like what he's dealing with is a normal thing in his job. And like to the same point of like, you as an adventurer, if you're a rogue or something, you wouldn't be either. The locks that you have, like the 30% chance of failure or success or whatever, are like the old rusty lock of like a dungeon somewhere or something enchanted, like something that is like notable that isn't just the regular common thing.
Yeah, exactly. It's exactly that, you know, rusty locks, trying to avoid traps and all kinds of things like that. And the problem is, as time has progressed from that core D&D experience, which most games have kind of branched off from or were inspired by, the adventure became wider scaling. You got to adventure in places that were normal, you know. You got to make characters. Even in Call of Cthulhu, which is a much more narratively driven experience, where it's a D100 roll under system, which is really fun. And I haven't played a lot of it, and I haven't looked too much into the stats. I do own Call of Cthulhu now. I bought it a wee while back, but
the only experience I have with that type is the Warhammer games, because Rogue Trader and Dark Heresy are D100 roll unders. And my only experience with them is, man, it really feels like I can't fail a single skill check in these games.
Which, you know, is kind of the intention. If you build your character in a certain way, you're going to be really, really good at some actions in particular. But there's still this kind of strangeness when it comes to how the stats all come together and like percentages and everything like that, because a lot of games have a unreasonable level of error that can occur with certain types of actions, because randomness only really matters when the outcome is like undeterminable to a certain degree, right? Like you can't say 100% an action you take will succeed. And so the story can change because of that. And what I find is the more I play Legend in the Mists, the more I find I love how the tag system works way more than stats. Because I think it's more representative of how reality really like dictates whether you're good at something or not. Because it's not just I'm really smart and I have a skill to do a thing. In Legend in the Mist, you are compounding your character's experiences, your qualities that are beneficial. Like, you know, if you have unique traits that make you really good at a thing, like having a very keen memory, or, you know, my father did this, you know, kind of tags. And you build your skill checks. There's no skills in in the Mist. Instead, you build your skill checks before you make them. And because it's a 2d6 system that already has a pretty significant chance of giving you at least a success with some consequence, it makes it where the more tags you add to a stat, the more likely you are to get just a full success. And even if it's just a few points, you at least get something and a consequence, which makes it feel like you did the thing, but you're not perfect at it. You still did the thing. And if you don't have any tags related to a stat, which again is something that, like, the more you play solo, the more that happens, because you don't have a party to round out, you know, all the types of characters you would have in a story. You are like, you start failing, or you start getting like pretty low successes a lot of the time doing a lot of things. And like, I find that the characters I make in Legend of the Mist feel more realistic than they do in other games, because it's not just that if I have a lot of relevant tags for a thing, it feels like pretty accurate. But when I have a lack of tags, it feels more punishing, because in games like Pathfinder, even if you lack a significant amount of stats, unless you have negative attribute modifiers, you can succeed sometimes at things pretty regularly, or at least with like a much better chance, like a 50% chance at certain types of checks.
Yeah, like, because I think Legend of the Mist, when it comes to how it's set up, is really just one of the coolest narrative first type games I've experienced. Because the tag system is really cool, and really interesting. And it's why, like, ever since you asked, like, are there any flaws with this system, that, like, when we're done with one of the games, it is, like, my takeaway really is, like, I think the only flaw of Legend of the Mist is if you're going into it not wanting to play Legend of the Mist. Because it's really just, like, this game is set up so you can make all these wide amount of characters, and you have all these options, and you can feasibly create someone that's super realistic in this narrative, and everything's contextualized. But if I went into Legend of the Mist being like, man, you know what I want? I want to do some good old-fashioned, classic, dungeon-delving RPG stuff. I don't think I would get that. Because I'm asking for, like, something way more gamey than, like, contextual narrative storytelling. I'm asking for, like, I want a dungeon crawl, I want full-on in-depth mechanical, like, build stuff. I want, like, all this loot. Like, I want the traditional fantasy adventure. And, like, you could do that in Legend of the Mist. It's just, it's going to feel very different.
Yeah.
It's the difference between playing, like, Disco Elysium and playing, like, Wrath of the Righteous Pathfinder. Like, they are both CRPGs, but both are doing very different things.
Yeah, it's a pretty good analogy, honestly. It's fascinating because the more I play Legend of the Mist, the more I'm confronted with different things. I would say, honestly, now that I've been looking into it more, one of the bigger flaws, I won't even call it a flaw, it's just about how you like your story flow to go. One of the problems Legend of the Mist has is skill checks take a bit of extra time because you have to build them every time you do a skill check. You can't just be like, let me roll my Arcana, roll +4, good. It's like, okay, what's relevant in this check? Let me look through my tags real quick.
Yeah.
Then you have to pick your tags, and then you go.
Yeah, because like you have to really figure out why you can do this thing or not. Yeah, that's I think a fair point with it. It's even with like mastery of the system, I think it would still kind of be present. But in that case, I think that is a mechanic incentivizes when those moments come up for them to actually mean something.
Yep.
Because unlike if you can do something really quick, easy, takes no time, and it's just basic set dressing, like, yeah, you can easily do that. Like, you roll Arcana, the check was like a 10, and now you can like help exposit something, and the player can be like, "Ooh, I discovered something. I'm a cool guy." And then in Legend of the Mist, it's like you would skip that because what's the point? What's the point of like shielding that between something that'll be like a 30-second little let's pause and look at your stats.
Yeah, and for me, I think it's worth it because I like the fact that my mechanics in the game, that my stat points effectively come from my character, who they are, what they do, and their experiences. Every time I make a skill check, it in turn connects to who my character is. Where in D&D or Pathfinder or whatever game you're playing, the GM's gonna be like, all right, roll for me an Arcana check when you're looking this over. And you roll and you're like, hope this is good. But that doesn't tell you anything about your character other than the fact that you've looked into Arcana, maybe. And that's not even always necessarily the case. Because sometimes a character, like, again, the D&D example of the dumb barbarian just rolls higher than the wizard because luck, you know? Because you have a whole D20 worth of number allocation difference that can come up. And in Legend of the Mist, that really just doesn't happen too often. Even if both players roll a character with 0 tags and a character with, like, let's say +4, which is pretty substantial in the game, right? A 0 tag character can still roll a 12 if they really want to, but in order to succeed is truly a 50-50, and that's if there's like no negative modifiers, which there typically is. And with the negative modifiers, usually it's like at least a -2. So a character with 0 tags is rolling with a -2, which means on a 2d6 they need to roll a minimum of a 9 or higher, which is actually pretty hard to do stat wise. I don't know, because it's not a linear system. It's a bell curve, so I don't know what percentage chance that is. I could look it up, but it's pretty actually difficult to do, and that's for a partial success. And to get a full success with no consequences, you would need to roll a 12. You need to roll a double 6, because that's pretty much the only way. Because if you roll a 11, you're going to get a 9, which is a partial success.
Yeah.
Where a character who has +4, they're going to have a +2 after the -2 penalty, which means that they just need to roll a 5 or higher, which is pretty easy to do in this game, at least over a 60% chance minimum. And that's just to get a partial success. And getting a full success with no consequences, they just have to roll an 8 or higher, which is a lot easier. So it's something where it makes a lot of sense and it reflects back to the character. Where in D&D and Pathfinder, stat checks are oftentimes just they're supposed to be a quick, like, easy, make your check, move on. Super simple. You roll a d20, you add a modifier, and you go from there. And it's supposed to keep the story moving, you know.
Everything, like, it kind of streamlines in that way, and like it's just that, I think, question of what style of tabletop are you shooting for in the moment when you want to sit down and play, because it's less of like is Legend of Mist the best game ever that can do everything and we should always play it? It's like, obviously no. We were the long advocates of you shouldn't have one game.
Yeah.
You should go around and try different things and treat tabletop like different games in and of themselves. You are inherently always going to get a different experience by like sitting down and playing playing something like Starfinder versus some like deciding I'm gonna make Pathfinder and the exact rules, but we're gonna say it's in space. You're going to get a different experience. And like it's important to have that. It's important to have that thing of what do I want to play today? Do I want something that's going to be this big narrative role play thing, or do I want something where I can play a very crunchy RPG? Because each time when you sit down has value. Because like I think Legend of the Mist is a game that our group could play a bunch, but if we played it a bunch, I'd then want to break and play something crunchy.
Yeah,
be like, can we please do some Pathfinder? Because man, I want to make a build.
Yeah, and there's like again, like you said, that value of I just kind of want to play a game. It's like playing Lancer. Like as an RPG experience, I don't like Lancer because playing a pilot feels pointless. The only fun part is playing the mechs. But the mech combat is really fun, and building your mechs is really fun. So I would like to play Lancer.
It also works, I think, with that analogy, kind of like with that example, because also Lancer is designed to really be that. Lancer is designed to be a game that's largely like the mech. You play the mech.
Yeah.
You play the mech, and like it's designed to be every week you have a new encounter.
Yeah.
Like, that's just how they kind of want it. It's very designed to be pick up and play. Because I think that's just the thing of how the designer, at least Orbital Dropkick, when I see a lot of his stuff, how he makes it. He seems to like games that are very much like you could pick it up, play it for a few weeks, put it down, and then pick it back up a month later.
Yeah.
Which I think is good to have. I think it's good to have games that are not trying to suck you into years-long campaigns.
Yeah, I agree.
And then for the people who want look at the pilot rules and are like, oh, it's so open, I can do whatever I want with it, and like I can do the work to make a really big narrative game, like it works for them because then they have that freedom to just do whatever they want. And then for other people, it's like, yeah, let's just do a couple let's do a few weeks of Lancer just so we can do some missions.
Yeah, and what Orbital Dropkick has gone on record to say about what they wanted for Lancer in general is Lancer is a mech game. Why are we spending so much time not being in mechs? So let's
honestly fair.
Let's just shorten that a bit and streamline that so that you can get to the part that you want as quickly as possible.
And I think it's important for your tabletop game. I think it's really important to have a thing like that. I think you need to understand when you're designing it, like, how do I really think people are going to play this? And how am I going to try to get them to play it in like this way? I think if your tabletop game is designed to be like, I can do anything, you're gonna sign yourself up for not even like issues, but I think you're a disservice. But there's a line, because like Legend of the Mist as a game system is very open. You can do whatever you want. It has a setting style that it sets up and gives you a lot of stuff for. But there's literally nothing stopping you from doing like a sci-fi story or like a high fantasy thing. Like there's nothing stopping you.
Which, to be fair, I think was the right choice. You should always release a setting and have a theme for your TTRPG. But even if it's a game that can be in a generic system, like I think it's important. But yeah, it's just good to have some kind of theme.
Exactly. I think they made the right choice. I think I said that verbatim like weeks ago because I think they made the correct decision and the best decision they could have with like the setting, because when I look at it, and I really like the comic that it opens up with, like showing you how it plays, and it's like kind of a choose your own adventure. I think it's a really smart way to do it, a really interesting way to like show how the game loop kind of operates and gives you immediate vibe that you can pull, because I think it has a very striking style where you look at like its aesthetic and you're like, I kind of want to play a game set in this. I think this is interesting because I like that style of like low magic fantasy a lot. I think it's really fun. But like what it's doing instead, it sets you up for all this. But Legend of the Mist is a game that's still very like you can play what you want. You can use the system, do what you want. And so then the core experience turns into like, okay, so it's this mechanical core experience is what you're getting out of it, rather than a game where you can jump into it and be like, oh man, I'm going to be able to tell a story in Stormlight Archive, a book series I like. The mechanics are here, but like I'm telling the story that's set in a universe I find really interesting. Like every game just needs a core thing that is like, this is how it's going to be played. It's meant to be played like this. This is the experience you're going to get. And I would say that's arguably a small failing of like the D&D Pathfinder style of like, it's a fantasy. Thumbs up. You can tell the fantasy story. Which is fun. Very cool. But like, I don't know. I think the D&D experience is kind of a nebulous user-created thing rather than something the game is setting out and intending you to do.
I don't know. I think that's just the problem with D&D in general is D&D has this perception of what it is, and so people who play the game are already going to lean in that way. So it kind of like by the very nature of its long history, it almost doesn't need to have a setting because people know what D&D is.
Yeah, like D&D is just the D&D. All it really means at the end of the day is fantasy. It's got the elves, it's got the dragons, it's got the goblins. Like, what else could it be? There's a lot of different types of fantasy, like out there. There's always different versions of it.
Yeah. And there's the nuances and everything like that, yeah. But so this kind of ties back around to kind of the silliness of attributes. So we've already determined, right, that attributes were kind of a way of differentiating characters, but it wasn't supposed to be super substantial. And then when you compare this to Legend of the Mist, the way skills and stats are set up is to streamline decision to action, right? I attack the enemy, I roll my attack, and we're good. You know, I don't have to do anything extra in that line. But what makes it silly for the various attributes and stats is that, one, I don't think they do what the tabletop wants them to do most of the time. Mm-hmm. Other than just create a variance of probability. But like, for instance, there's a lot of times where a campaign doesn't have the significant number of instances of a particular skill check to allow probability to give you a reasonable like level of reliability. And what I mean by this is how often, like, and here's a good question for you, for Alex, right? Because you're a general player. How often have you guys like needed to roll a religion check throughout the campaigns I've had you run?
I'll say just in your games, not really. In other D&D games, relatively, like, it's as common as a nature survival, like, intelligence check would be. But it's largely because, like, that isn't something you really explore in your campaigns.
Well, I mean, even in Baldur's Gate, right? Even though there are some god presences in that story, you actually don't roll religion that often.
A lot of times, at least in Baldur's Gate, it's because early on, yeah, I think Act 3 has more because of just like a triad of evil gods that come into play in like the beginning. But largely, religion checks in that game are passive skill. Like, it's a passive thing that just procs and you get some context. Like the beginning of the game where it's like, this is a god of the dead. It's the scribe of the dead, whoever that guy is.
But it's just one of those ones that doesn't come up a lot unless you're playing a game very much themed around it, you know. In a standard dungeon crawl, unless you're dealing with devils of some kind, you're just not going to roll religion. It's very particular. Survival. depending on the type of game you're rolling or you're playing in, survival probably just doesn't proc a lot.
And that's one of the big kind of concerns with Ranger, because it's set up because I think survival is something that could happen way more often, because more likely than not you guys are walking in wilderness somewhere. The question is it the survival your Ranger is built to be good at?
Right, and does the GM find it necessary to even add to the story, which is unlikely the case. But, old-fashioned GMs definitely are a lot more tuned into the need for survival checks and like traversing the wild, because that was part of the adventure back in the day. It wasn't just what's in the dungeon, it's getting there, going through the wilderness, those Lord of the Rings shots of the characters traversing various landscapes, right? Which is funny because in Lord of the Rings, not very often do they actually need to worry about where they're running, but
I mean, Legolas does. I only say that because the second movie is legitimately like a quarter of it is Legolas running off ahead and pointing in a direction.
Well, yeah, but that's because they're tracking like intentionally the hobbits.
Yeah, they're intentionally like the second movie in particular is the one where it's just the main three running places, because that's where what your elven eyes see.
Yeah.
Like that is like I think the only example of that in the movies, or at least the story. Other than Aragorn getting herbs, that's the other time survival is used.
Yeah, and there's a little bit of time with Frodo and Gollum and Sam where they're traversing various places in like the swamp, and Smeagol or Gollum is just like, don't look in the swamp, but
of course he looks in the swamp.
And of course he ends up looking in the swamp, yeah. But
because you can't just not look at a swamp if you say don't look at it.
Right. But like that's the thing where and I've been watching a lot of the Lord of the Rings lately because my daughter loves them, so that's good.
Good. They're very good movies.
She loves Gollum, especially when he's screaming. That's her favorite part.
That's really funny.
But yeah, so it's funny because at the end of the day, in a lot of the situations we see in media and a lot of different types of situations, you can guess what kind of stats a character has, but only based roughly on the kinds of characters they are and what they're doing, But a character's 1 to 2 point intelligence difference can be really hard to even parse out when that is relevant. And it doesn't feel super relevant most of the time. And in a game where your characters are supposed to fill specific roles, it's kind of interesting to me, the idea of that percentage chance of failure, where it's just like, you're a wizard, and they're supposed to be really smart and know all these arcane knowledges. But when they don't make those checks, they're failing literally at the role they're there for.
Yeah. I mean, it's like, to use another Lord of the Rings analogy, it's Gandalf, your entire thing is to help us do some magic shit, and now you got stun locked by a door asking you to say friend.
Yeah.
Like, that is a failed Arcana check right there.
It is. Which is funny. But that only really happens once, And it doesn't really happen similarly for the other characters. And
except when, I guess, Viggo Mortensen, not Aragorn, he failed a Constitution check or Strength check when he kicked the helmet and broke his toe.
Yeah,
I can't wait till you can tell Belle that.
Yeah. See the scene right here? Yeah, he just broke his toe.
Yeah, it's custom. You have to say it.
Mm-hmm. But it becomes kind of silly and interesting, and I don't think it's bad. Don't get me wrong. I'm not saying we shouldn't be doing that, because at the end of the day, I think what makes RPGs and tabletop games interesting is the lack of knowledge of success or failure, you know, the lack of like, I don't know if I'm going to make this check or not. It really just depends on the dice. But in my experience doing this for as long as I have, I find that most of the time that insecurity on how good your rolls are going to be, like some players just have real terrible luck, and it doesn't feel like the character they made gets played because they can't roll above a 10.
Yeah.
And
like, it's not fun when that happens.
And on top of this, right, there's a lot of times in RPGs where a check is a obstacle in the way of progression because it is by necessity, right? Like getting through a locked door is a very good example, and this is why the door is so iconic in the RPG scene, as kind of like this thing that stumps adventures, right? Because the locked door represents a choke point in progression. It's very hard to get anywhere if the way forward is blocked. And so if you have a skill check related to this, you have this chance of that block coming up, and then the players need to find another way around the situation. And it wouldn't be such a problem if you had the ability to make characters have high reliance or reliability in certain fields over others. Because then, you know, you can have a character who is good at picking locks, who can get you through a door every time. Because like Anima Beyond Fantasy, and this is kind of one of the reasons why I really transitioned hard into Anima, was I was just tired of watching my players make an interesting character who has a very interesting vibe and aesthetic, and the reason they're there is typically for a particular type of skill they have, and then to watch that player fumble it over and over, and it feels kind of bad.
Yeah.
And in Anima, unless you roll a 3 or lower on a D100, which is somewhat rare, you know, 3% chance. If you have enough points in the appropriate skill, you can do the skill at least at a moderate difficulty 100% of the time. And if you're doing a challenging thing, something that is supposed to be narratively and mechanically like difficult to do, well, it just doesn't feel as bad because that's the expectation, is that failure is the thing. But when it comes to like the regular checks, because this is the thing, right? Every TTRPG has moderate level difficulty checks, like by necessity, right? And moderate checks are supposed to be in practice something that is done regularly, succeeded regularly by characters who are specialized or particularly skillful in said check, or is somewhat accessible to characters even if they're not trained, right? But that's just not how it works most of the time. Oftentimes, you know, you need that skilled character to try it, and the chance of failure is, you know, not 0. It's like 20% failure chance or 30% failure chance, which is pretty high for something that they're supposed to be able to do because that's what they're focused on. So it's not that I think that having stats and attributes are dumb. I feel like it's just we don't have appropriate amounts of stat distribution to make them work the way they should. And not only that, but I'm going to kind of lean on the attributes end of things more. It causes mechanical problems when you have a stat that can be applied to a wide variety of checks, right? So in any game, if you're trying to min-max, you're going to try to bump the stats that can let you do more things, and you're going to dump the stats that make you do less things. And this is why like charisma typically is a dump stat for a lot of characters, because for the types of actions they want to do, charisma is not one of them. So they bump their strength so that any strength related stat they can have But I feel like that's a problem because that implies that a character who has decent strength can do all strength related checks relatively well rather than based on their experiences or focuses or whatever. And so that's why stat points typically don't give you that high of a chance increase because they're too variable. They can apply to too many situations. So we have this weird situation of two stat types. You have your skill stats and you have your attribute stats coming together, where your attributes are applied to a lot of things and your skills are supposed to apply to a narrow range of things. And they come together where if you're high in both, you're supposed to be really good at that kind of thing.
Yeah, because, like, I think it is also an issue that is always just going to be exasperated by users, and, like, how people play games.
Yeah.
Because for a lot of this, I think games need to do a better job of kind of telling people when to proc rolls, when this stuff matters. Because literally, I think half of these issues could be solved if the general, like, player, DMs, everything, knew, like, when it's appropriate to make a skill check. Because a skill check really should only be done when there is a reasonable expectation of failure. And, like, that failure means something.
Yeah.
And then, on the other hand, I think there also needs to be a system in your game to make a player able to express that they are inherently skilled, mastered, experts, like, at whatever thing they want to do. Like, Pathfinder's math sets it up pretty well, I think. Like,
Yeah.
It's still, the only flaw is that it's a D20 system. You can still get a nat 1. However, there are a lot of ways to basically make it so your nat 1 isn't that bad.
Yeah, well, I'd also say that the numbers don't really start leaning in your direction until level 7 when you get mastery.
Yeah, like, it takes a little bit, which I think can be fun. It can be fun that, like, hey, I get to tell the story of my character becoming really good at this thing instead of just good. But, like, having those methods of expressing a character mastery and character, like, exactly what they want to do. Even to the point where I think it's important as a GM to then be like, well, yeah, your character's really good at this skill. I'm not going to make you roll for, like, this now. Like, maybe this used to be a challenge for you at, like, level 4, but it's not a challenge for you at level 7.
Right.
I'm just not going to proc the roll.
This is why I actually really like the Cosmic RPG, because of their specialties that you can get in the game.
Yeah.
Because you could have, like, a lockpicking specialty, for instance. And by how the game is supposed to be played, it either lets you auto-succeed those checks or attempt a check that you normally wouldn't be able to attempt.
Yeah, like, that's a system that's really good.
Mm-hmm.
It works really well of showing that off for your character and showing how cool you are and giving value to the idea of, like, I'm picking something to express my character that might not be fully meta. Like, is this the best statistical option I could take? Probably not. But it's a way to express my character, and now I get these extra options.
Well, and I like it because, like, weapon specialties, for instance, give you new weapon traits that you can utilize in the game.
Oh, yeah. I like that a lot.
I do too.
Like, that's really cool. I think having methods like that are nice fixes. Just because, like D&D has expertise. The math in D&D is just kind of dumb. Until,
an
like,
advantage
really
throws everything out the window, so.
Yeah, like, it's why in D&D I am a big proponent that I think you should add expertise to characters as they level. I think you get to a certain level, I think you should just get 2 free expertise.
Yeah.
And then, like, you can get an extra 1 later. But also, like, you get that on top of the classes that are built for expertise because, yeah, you're a bard and rogue are meant to be the skill monkeys. So this just accentuates the fact that they're a skill monkey. Because usually those type of characters have, like, 6 stats that they really focus on. It's like, there's, like, a good few. Might drop a handful. Like, when I play my bard, I focus on every type of charisma except intimidation. And then I had a few intelligence skills. Like, that, all it does is just make it so your character feels better. And Pathfinder just has that with mastery and, like, the assurance of, oh yeah, no, I don't even have to roll for this, or like, if I fail, I actually succeed, etc., etc. I think having those in your system is just really important.
Yeah, I really like Cosmere's specialty system. I think that augments the normal stat distribution and like percentages really well, because what it does is it lets you have the general range of things that you can do pretty well, but you have a somewhat like decent chance of failure, and have those things that you are really good at that you just don't fail at all. And I feel like the number one problem I'm finding with a lot of TTRPGs is the low level, what a low level character represents versus like what a player wants for their character. Because here's the thing, I especially because I've been turned into a player more often now because I've been doing solo play, right? So I've been playing the game more. I've starting to discover that I dislike low levels of play a lot because you make a character who's supposed to like be able to do a thing, right? Like that's the whole reason why you play a character at all, is I want a character who can do this. And low levels of plays are like, okay, but you're not there yet. And it's just like, so you got to struggle. Playing a low level caster feels bad because you can't do half the caster things that you really wanted to do when you made the character in the first place. I've made a lot of builds for Pathfinder 2e, and the sad part is most of them didn't come online until near level 10. Which is like, wow, I have to wait 10 levels to play the character the way I wanted to.
You know, because like, I get it. I think like I'm thinking about it. I think it depends on the campaign. I think if we're gonna do it, if you do a short game and like you're setting something up for like a short amount of 10 sessioner, and you set us up at level 2, that's weird. Why don't we just do the most fun part of leveling? But like if it's a long game, I actually really like starting off low, because even like if we start off at like level 3 or something, like I still like starting off low, because it's instead of like the tabletop experience of I'm setting out to make a character who can do this and does this well. I like to tell the story of a character who will one day be able to do that. Like the story of this character will eventually grow into this, because I think just the expression of character growth and the things you find on the path to getting high level is really interesting. It's like I think our anima game would go very different and very probably not as engaging if we started off at like level 4 or 5. But us starting off at level 1 as like regular people, mostly with quirks, with a lot of quirks, but starting off as like people in the world that will soon scale higher and higher, I think makes it way more interesting of like a long story. And also, like, I'll say the struggle of it does, like, yeah, there's a lot of annoying struggle of it. Low level Pathfinder casters is just kind of poop. But I also think there's a degree of fun in the desperation and trying to figure out how the hell do you get a step up in the world when like you're set up really low. It's like, okay, how do I get any form of advantage possible? And is there any like clever ideas I can come up with instead of relying off my very good stuff?
Also, thanks, Kettern, for the sub. We appreciate you. Yeah, I mean, well, so here's the thing, right? There's the idea or the ideal of going from zero to hero, right? And if that's the kind of story you want to tell, I think that's fine. I think that's relatively speaking, like, well within the bounds of what you can already do in TTRPGs. But what I find is a player makes a character because, like, right, to be an adventurer demands some level of excellence from a character, because otherwise you're just a person doing a very, very dangerous job where you're likely to die. And these games give you that level of statistical advantage over like a common villager. Like even if you're +0 in an attribute, just by the grace of being a hero and the things you have access to, allows you to kind of go above and beyond that. But what I'm more referring to, I'm not talking about like feats of accomplishment, right? I'm not talking about like a level 1 character should slay a dragon, or a level 1 character should be able to solve this complex riddle that's been left unsolved for ages and stuff like that. It's more of like, I'm playing a street rat who's had to survive purely off of my thieving skills for most of my life. I've picked 1,000 locks at this point, you know. But when you play as an adventurer, and we went through this example already, that 30 to 20% fail chance just seems a little high when it's like a mundane thing like picking locks of standard types of doors. You know what I mean? And because I agree, I love growth. I'm addicted to games that have lots of progression, which is probably why I'm a very big fan of Legend in the Mist, because you're progressing your character all the time. But like there's a certain level of like what I want my character to do, right? Because every example of a character in that people, not every example, but like 99% of examples of characters that start an adventure, like why are you here, why are you on this adventure, is typically I've been doing this kind of thing before and here I am, or I've trained for this and here I am. Like I went to wizarding school. Like in Pathfinder, the very premise of being a wizard is you went to some kind of wizarding college. Like, which sometimes you can get away with the idea because it's like, well, you've been given this familiar from your patron, and so you're being given gifts. It doesn't confer like proficiency, just like what you've been given, what you're capable of. But like if you're a rogue character, you're not just some guy who came off the street. You're someone who has to have like a lot of skills in order to be considered a rogue, and like the ability to backstab people and do a lot of damage, which technically requires a lot of skill in itself. Like a lot of these games imply some level of proficiency and skill at level 1 for to be what you even are. And so it's weird to me when you're struggle busting on the things that you should be good at, you know, at the beginning, on a moderate level of difficulty, as I mentioned before. Like the moderate difficulty things should just be like 100% success for what you're doing, unless circumstances are making it difficult, like picking luck under stress, or, you know, making an arcana check about a creature as you're running away from it, or as you're about to engage it in combat, you know. And so this kind of just leans into what you said before of, yeah, there's sometimes where the GM just shouldn't have you roll for something you should be good at. But because stats exist, and because technically DCs exist, and because technically a character completely untrained in it shouldn't be able to, like, if you've never picked a lock before, right, even picking a general lock should be somewhat difficult, right? And because that exists, we have skill checks for moderate difficulty things, which means there's that chance that a skilled character can fail those checks.
Yeah.
And that's why, again, I like Cosmere's specialty system, because specialties allow you to kind of bypass this by allowing you to just auto succeed at a niche thing that you're particularly good at, you know. So
yeah, it kind of runs into like the level of what level of failure is more interesting for storytelling, because like I also think there's the degree, besides the fact of oh man, you had this thing and you failed, it like always sucks in the moment, especially when you're like, it's just because the math isn't in my favor at the current moment, like as I'm low level, my character's built to do this thing really well, and they won't get that for a while. I think there's also a degree where in a lot of those moments there are ways to still tell the story of it, to still like to have more reason besides like, oh yeah, it's just like the skill is the reason you failed. If anything, it's a shout out to the Legend of the Mist system for like how it kind of handles the complications. Because like not all of it is just because damn you suck at this, dude. It's like no, there's extenuating circumstances that came out. Because like I think it's really interesting if you have a say you're like all right, let's do some lock picking. You got to do it quickly. You're snuck into a manor. Oh man, a nat one. Well, you didn't fail because you're bad at it or it broke. You failed because like a guard is coming through the door you were trying to pick.
Yeah.
Like that is a more interesting way of handling failure.
Yeah.
And there's a degree of that skill that I think it takes to figure out the to make it so that burden feels less. Because like in my playing of like solo Legend of the Mist, I kind of like how I'm like first I had the bit where I'm like I'm a super cool assassin, I could do this. But I also found that like the mission I did, I was like partially flailing the entire time.
Yeah,
And
yeah, right.
I really enjoyed that. I really
Yeah.
enjoyed how kind of not good I was. And like if I was a master assassin, I beat everything and I got a success on everything, I'd find the solo mission thing a way more boring. But it's the strength of like my character starting out being like the story I want to tell is him growing into something. And to tell that story, I cannot start that character off at like a decent level. Like this is a character that couldn't start off at like a level 5 or a level 7. He has to start off at a level 1. And like in the same regard that I have characters that I could not start at level 1, they'd have to be like a level 10, 12 character to tell their story. It's just the different power levels based on like the important aspect is making a character that's realistic for the level you're starting at. Because like if you're starting a character off and he's like, yeah, he's been doing this for like 10 years, he's a master rogue, and I'm level 1. It's like that, like, yeah, sure, man. I imagine you've done like decent amount, but like that, I don't think that tracks as much instead of the story of, oh yeah, this is like my first time going out after learning this skill. Like I got taught it for a couple years and now I get to actually apply it.
Yeah. Well, I mean, so what I like in Legend in the Mist, right, is because you get a significant number of tags. You get 13 tags technically when you start the game, which is you get 3 for each of your themes, which you start with 4 themes, and then you get a item in your backpack, which can be helpful in a lot of situations. But with that, your character can only specialize in some kinds of actions. Like, I've learned to have two themes dedicated to your major like combat / what you want to do type actions, and then 2 themes dedicated to like kind of rounding your character out to do some other things. But that still makes it where at the beginning of the game there's going to be a lot of situations where you might get a +1, but because oftentimes a particular check has a -2 due to environment or the enemy imposing or everything like that, there's a lot of situations where you're rolling with a 0 or a -1 or a -2, except for the one thing you're good at, which you probably have like +3 in, because I agree, right? I love the fact that my character can struggle, but I like the fact that in Legend of the Mist you can give yourself tags to be good at a thing at the very least, even if it's not like everything. And it's a game that's very hard to make a character who can do everything because tags are supposed to be linear. So 12 tags sounds like a lot, but it really doesn't, because you need multiple tags to actually be considered good at a thing. It only lets you be good at like a small handful of things. So what I think games should do is have things characters can be good at. Well, they have to struggle and everything with everything else, because that allows you to have a party fill those gaps for you, or it allows you to be creative, trying to use your strengths to overcome your weaknesses, or just that floundering feeling. Because I agree, I do love the moments where my character struggles in a scene. It makes it feel like I'm learning in the moment. And like the next time I apply it, I improve one of my themes, I might apply a new tag based on what I struggled with in the mission prior, which feels like actual growth.
Yeah, because I just think there's the different level of like that feeling of like struggling and flailing that comes from the struggling you have as a character who's like decent level versus like the low level campaign start feeling. Because like it feels that's really the best way to put it. Like agreed. Like it feels like your character's learning in some way. There is something that they're setting up and learning. Because it's been the fun part. I think the anima is our anima game is one of the best examples of some of the strengths of a low level like game start. Because there are a lot of elements for like how my characters was going to progress and like the powers I had in mind that have changed as time went on. As I've spent more time in his head, as he's learned more, as he's figured more stuff out, he's thought about like, okay, I think there are these directions I want to go, and over time, I think eventually, straight up, he might just get some fucking Dragon Ball things. I'm going to make myself a beam finisher attack because I have a really fun idea in my head for it. Um, but like, there are directions I've taken him that are changing based off of the things he's learning and the more time you spend with him. Uh, which I think is also the strengths of playing a character that is like variable. Because I think showing up to a game with a full build setup is probably setting yourself up for a more staticky feeling character. I think it's a lot more interesting to tell the story of a character who like does level around with like the party and the campaign happen to be, because I like the idea of picking stuff that's your character's realizing is needed in the scenario instead of I got my build route, I gotta stick to the build route. uh I think it's more interesting to see that form of growth versus the kind of staticky, buildy feeling.
Yeah, I agree. Though I gotta say, in anima, that's kind of like a problem because
Yeah,
being getting points to do good in a stat isn't like on the next level up. It's several levels up to get enough development points to even invest in a thing that you were bad at before.
yeah, and I think the best fix to that is the take away the skill penalty for not being untrained in it. Because I do think that
Even
is like
then,
that there's a big fix that adds, because it really changes it from like you have to spread your points out. If you're like, even this is going to come up, I have to spend development points in it to make sure I don't get the penalty for it. Like always level swim is kind of a thing for that game, because
yeah,
you'll never know when you're just gonna fucking drown. Uh, or like always have these things kind of just available, and then taking away the minus like 30, I think is
yeah,
what it
minus
was.
30.
Yeah, minus 30 immediately makes it, it's like hits the point way harder of, okay, so like these are possible. Like I could do this. Is it going to be super good? Probably not, but like I have a slightly higher chance that feels better. Uh
Yeah, I don't know, because the problem is, for a moderate check, sure, it becomes a lot better. But as the game scales higher, like, you can't. It's very, very hard, if unless your character is set up, to have a character who at level 1 is bad, has 0 points, right, in a secondary ability, and then to eventually get up to like even like a 180 DC, right? Because that takes a lot of development points, and there's a lot of other things your character probably wants more than like this secondary ability thing that you picked up. I mean, don't get me wrong, I agree with your point that like the anime game has been fun because it feels like you guys are low level in practice, uh which is good. You know, that I'm glad that we can have that experience, and I'm glad that I've been implementing choices to give you guys the ability to increase your secondary abilities. You know, you discover a thing, and so you learn more about occultism, you know, or whatever. That's not native to the system though. That's homebrewed, but
no, yeah. I think that's because there's going to be those moments, and a lot of times the solution in practice is you got to adjust for the table like as you go. Though I would rather some things be baked into the game itself.
right.
But like, yeah, I I I I think there is a big special thing about low level campaigns when you are going to really grow with a character. And I think it turns into that point of the fun of the story is the struggling to get to the peak. Because like, I mean, Stormlight Archive would be less interesting if Kaladin spent the majority of the books just kind of winning. Him losing constantly and then winning is what made it feel good. Because then you get to have that emotional high.
Yeah, but so
And,
let me flip it on you though, right? Because I think this proves my point a bit more. Kaladin is very interesting because he is, one, starting off in the story, a talented warrior. Talented, not even like necessarily trained. He just has a lot of skill with the spear. He did train, of course, obviously. He did a lot of katas and everything like that, but he was just naturally gifted with the spear. He was trained as a doctor, and that came in handy. But what makes Kaladin's story interesting, and the parts that we get to see him grow, is him dealing with the things he's not good at. You know, dealing with other people, dealing with loss, dealing with just like being a very awkward guy in a lot of
yes,
situations. You know.
he's a guy that inherently I like that they do a lot of effort to put this in. He is a draining human being to be around. Like, he is kind of an emotional black hole.
Yeah.
Just to hang out
sometimes,
with.
yeah.
Because that is kind of how it hits sometimes if you let your shit go a little out of whack. Because you gotta manage your own shit. You can't put that on other people.
Yeah. But my point being, I think characters should be good at a thing, you know, or a couple things at least, and then build from there, right? That's where it's like, here's the thing, like, I know a scenario, or I know a set of scenarios I'm good at, but I'm weak everywhere else. And it's about improving the things you are good at, but also bolstering yourself with additional, you know, experiences to build around that, or to have a party to lean in onto to cover those gaps for you. It's just, in my opinion, I think characters should be, and when I'm saying good, right, I'm saying reliably good at things that are considered moderately difficult, you know.
Because in that case, like Kaladin, if someone gets an injury, or there is a normal person in front of him that he's fighting, like in the beginning of the story, there is a very reasonable chance he just has that. Like, that's just kind of a surefire thing.
Yeah.
It's the moments where it's like, ah, fuck, that's a lot of dudes, Kaladin. Ah, fuck, that guy's in shard plate. And, like, he got it. I would argue that's probably a nat 20 moment where he kills him. Like, because that is the inherent, like, all right, fuck, it's do or die time.
Yeah, right. And that's the thing. Like, Kaladin, sure. I mean, yeah, he does beat people in shard play twice, actually.
Well, in book 1, because book 2, we can argue that he's at least leveled up a couple of times.
Right.
But like,
kind
it's
of,
that.
but yeah.
He has Stormlight, and he can heal himself and at least get himself a little faster, stronger. Because that scene, he was just lightly breathing in enough that no one would notice.
Right.
But that is, in that case, him unarmored. If he gets like hit once, he's fucking dead.
Yeah.
But yeah, like, because I get what you mean there, and I think that is the aspect of your game should have a reasonable thing that you can show up and be good. If you're gonna show up to a game as a fighter, I think you gotta be able to like fight a guy in combat. Like, if you fought another level 1 fighter, it should be like a fair fight. If you fought like a standard bandit trooper guy that's definitely untrained, or not trained as good as like someone notable would be, you're not the hero in that situation. You're the mook. There should be a reasonable chance of victory there. Like, obviously, unless you're like swarmed or something.
Right.
It is just the fact that like some games handle early level better than others. I think D&D early level is a failure.
Yeah.
Of their scaling, in so much that they've said just start your game at level 3.
Right.
Which I think is a cheap shit. I think Pathfinder's a little better with it, but it still has the same trapping.
It's more or less the same, but yeah.
It's just the fact that I think the math in Pathfinder's better. That's really all it is.
Gets better,
the core system math is better, and even early level, it's like, at least you're with Pathfinder math, and Pathfinder math is good, and the engine works, but it still has that issue. There's games that do it worse and games that do it better.
Again,
Uh,
like I think Cosmere fixes the problem, and like if Pathfinder and D&D implemented the specialty system, I think that would there you go, quell my problems pretty quickly, because then I could
yeah,
be like, well, and then I at least have one thing my character is supposed to be good at, right?
yeah, and like there's the element where it's like the dichotomy between playing a game and like telling the story, because it is a thing of developing a story where like most of your story is your characters kind of losing and the characters falling, because that's something that was taught to me really hard in screenwriting specifically. Is a big element of screenwriting is adding more and more and more things going wrong. That's just how you kind of write your, if you're going to write your story, naturally a lot of people who are untrained in it start to create a very frictionless story
Mm-hmm.
where like nothing is really going bad for your characters, nothing is really happening, so like what's the point of following if like this character isn't struggling at all. And then there's the times where it can get bad, where if your character's just tumbling their way to the finish line and then they get then it finally shoots back up and they win. That's also unsatisfying, because it's like, this guy's a fucking loser. Like, how did he do this?
Harry Dresden in most of the early books, at least.
I do enjoy that aspect only because I think book two, Harry is. I think the entire part of him getting arrested all the way to the end, I enjoy how fucking ragged he is. It's clear he's like, I
Mm-hmm.
know what to do here. I know what I should do. I'm just, fuck, I'm in so much pain.
Yeah, it's
Like,
like, give me a moment to breathe. Shit. Then he
I
gets
really
captured by
like that.
werewolves. And
Like, that is a tone and like a pacing of a story I find really fun. Is just like, it is that tumble to the finish line, but by someone who's like knows what they're doing, and they know enough of what they're doing that they're like, this is unfair. I'm so much better than this. Uh, if every Dresden File story was like that, I'd get exhausted. But largely, I'm pretty sure it's just that one that has that pacing. Uh, but like, there's those elements. There's elements of like figuring out where to add your struggle, where to add your pressure. And when it comes to a tabletop game, you can't really do it in the same way,
yeah.
because if you wrote your tabletop story and you put your players through that same experience, you're just like, what? This is exactly like your favorite shows and books. It just feels worse. It feels worse to play that because you're like, man, I suck ass.
Yeah.
It's like, yeah, it's probably what the character's thinking right now, but it's a difference because you're showing up to a game to play something fun, be cool, and like have fun with your friends, and you walk away from like, damn, my character sucks ass. There's just like, there's a balance there. It's like there's a different way of doing the story in tabletop that I think is a really interesting possible future discussion too, of like, what is the, I think writing a tabletop story, or in whatever way you write a tabletop story, is a very different experience than writing like a show, a movie, a book,
Yeah.
or even a video game, I'd say.
Yeah, it's definitely interesting, and again, that's kind of why I like specialties. I like things that let you feel like you're really good at a thing, and then you can build around that. Like it that's why I was surprised, because for me, for the longest time, I've always been obsessed with the idea of justifying a character's strength, right? Like, whenever I make a character, I want my character to be strong, but I'm thinking about how they got there always, because I want my character's strength to be validated. I hate when I read or watch a anime or read a story, and like there's just the character is just like obscenely strong for no reason, and by the end of it, they're just like a god, and it's like, well, of course they are. They were just kind of that way from the start, you know. And so I've always been obsessed with the idea of like justifying my character's strength. But I kept making characters for my solo games that started off more or less as normal people. And I kept running into situations where I'm like, man, normal people normal people suck. They can't do things that you want them to do because they don't have that focus, that experience that sets them out. So like I ended up deleting a few of my other runs just because the character I made was too fresh, too new, and I couldn't do things the way I wanted to. I kept running into struggles, and sometimes just having a character die, because wouldn't you know, if just a normal-ish person, maybe a person who's a little bit more motivated than your normal person, does adventuring type things, they die a good amount of the time.
That's a big reason I always hold my value of when you're making a character. I think an important aspect you should think about is why are they engaged? Why are they here?
Yeah.
Like, why are they engaging in this behavior that's inherently suicidal? Like, if you take it statistically.
And to that end, I think that has to be because they feel like they can do it because they're particularly good or talented at a thing relevant to what they're going to be doing, you know, typically fighting if you're going to be an adventurer, if I'm going to be honest. But
I think it's either there's like really two answers I think it finds is like either I know I can do this because I have some extra skill, or like what else do I have is the other thing. Like, it's not like I'm going to lose anything is another response to that question, because I find it way more interesting. I find that question very interesting to ask, is like, why is your character engaging in such a dangerous thing? And I think the first step personally to show up to a tabletop game, because every game just has the assumption that like your character is in some way notable. It is why your character has a character design, why they have a name. It's like the anime thing of like, oh, I wonder who the protag in the shot is.
Right, yeah. And then
like the reason this character has pink hair is because they're in some way notable. So, like, what makes them notable? And the first question I find that's really useful is like, why are they doing this? And even if it's like a really complicated one or a very short answer, having an answer there makes your character a little bit more engaging, instead of the characters that are like, I'm here and I don't want to participate.
Yeah, and so I'm gonna I'm surprised I haven't talked about it more this stream, because that's normally what I've been doing, but now I'm gonna talk some glowing praises about Legend in the Mist, because I feel like it answers a lot of these problems and creates for better character interactions early in the story. Because the thing is, Legend in the Mist, you can justify your character's effective strength by their tags, and those tags are relevant to their story. So for the two scenarios that you just talked about, whether it's because they know they can do it, or they have a, you know, either a drive or some, you know, like some circumstance that kind of puts them in this dangerous field, right? You can have a tag that calls like that's like guts, you know, or nothing to lose can be a tag that you can use in a lot of situations, which is fun, right? You can't do that in other TTRPGs. You can't mechanically justify or you can't mechanically back up your character's like ability to do things, because your character just has a abnormal amount of like guts or an abnormal amount of like desire. Like, no matter how bad you want to kill those goblins, right, you don't get extra modifiers for wanting to kill goblins. But in Legend in the Mist, you can. Hatred of goblins can be a stat that allows you to roll better against goblins. You know, it mechanically represents your character's story. And if you're really good at a thing, you can represent that as well through various experiences, like practiced with the blade, or, you know, sire of a sword master, you know, something like that. Or progeny of a sword master, you know. It's something where it justifies it. It mechanically influences things, and it makes it where your character is good at a thing, and we know why they're good at a thing, so that anytime you need to make a skill check, it is constantly referencing your character in everything you do. Everything about your character, who they are, what they can do, is what is what allows you to do skill checks, which I love. I think that's really, really good. And it's one of the reasons why I've fallen so in love with the Legend in the Mist system, because you get to do that. You get to tell your story with your tags, and because you can improve your tags, and you improve your tags by facing your character's weaknesses, right? You can justifiably have your character adapt and grow. And you can't do like the build thing in Legend in the Mist. I mean, you could in theory, right? But your themes need to change as you evolve them when you hit your milestones. And you improve whenever your weaknesses come up, which is contextual to the story. You don't really get much choice in that. And the kind of tags you add, you might make choices that are more contextual or like relevant to what's happening in the game. If you're in the middle of like tracking a character down, trying to like find them and they're hiding, and you mark finally enough to improve one of your themes, you're probably likely to give yourself a tag that's going to be useful for the thing you're trying to do, because you don't want to lose, you don't want to fail, you know. So you're given pressure to grow in certain directions based on the story, which is just really hard to anticipate before you play the game. So I bring this
because
all,
like your plots can be random, and just so you could just have a guy showing up in a town and then get embroiled in a big old conspiracy.
Yeah, especially if you're playing solo or if you're using the oracles, you know. So you know, it's something where like let me be vulnerable here, right? For me, the more I play Legend in the Mist, the more difficult it gets in my mind to play other types of TTRPGs, because I feel like I lose so much. Like even I've loved Pathfinder a lot. I've grown this channel based on Pathfinder 2e. But now it's just like going from a system where every skill check I make is determined by my character's experience, past, and who they are, their personality, all that kind of stuff, and going to a game where it's just like, all right, you see mystic runes, like, hey, can I roll Arcana to see if I know these runes or not? I was like, okay, go ahead. Okay, I got a success. You know what these runes are, and just go from there, you know. Or nope, you don't know what these runes are. Like, none of that told any of my character story at all. It was just, hey, GM, I have a stat that's good in this. Can I roll it? You know? And if I want to do things that are more narrative in games like Pathfinder, I have to intentionally go and roleplay those out, you know? Which isn't bad, right? But what I'm saying is, in Legend in the Mist, you do that just as a part of the game. You do that as you breathe in Legend in the Mist. You can't do anything without it being relevant to your character's story in some way. But in other games, you know, if you want to add narrative to your character, you have to actively go out and roleplay to do those things. And not only that, but character progression can feel stifling a lot of the times, because you're like, I'm going to level up, but I can't, you know, like, oh, this level up, I get a new spell and a class feat, but I don't get a skill increase. So I got a little bit better technically, because of you add your level to your skill modifiers, but also difficulties also scale based off of level. So, you know, but depending, but it's just you just don't get to progress in that same way. Where like in Legend in the Mist, literally, I feel my character growing with every session I play actively. And I can do new things after every session. And the story shapes my character. Like when my character died in the solo play, like I mentioned earlier, I lost a trait that was kind of fundamental. I lost my character's keen mind. So the thing he used a lot for his investigative qualities of being just a really smart character got wiped away because of being resurrected. And now I have to rebuild my theme from scratch. You know, the only thing I have now was resurrected as my tag, which I don't even know how that would apply in a lot of situations, you know. maybe if I run into another character who's been resurrected, we can commiserate and I can use it to like talk to them. But other than that, that's a very hard tag to use. But I get to grow, and when I hit my milestone, I'll get to evolve it into a whole new theme that represents that growth. And one of the cool things in Legend in the Mist as well, is something I should make mention of, when you evolve a theme, so if you evolve a theme from like trade in skill to like prodigious ability, or you go from like circumstance to like prodigious ability, you can keep some of your tags or even rewrite some of your tags when you evolve that theme to represent your experiences. So in my Lore of the Mysteries solo game that I've been doing, you get sequences, which are like your special powers, and eventually I'm going to get to a point where I'm just going to condense a whole sequence and all of its abilities into one tag, because I'll have so many other abilities, but I'll have one tag that represents all the skills I had. So like if you had prodigious ability and you went back down to like a retired swordsman or whatever, your prodigious ability can be a tag. Sure, it doesn't stack and you're not necessarily like going to get as much benefit from it as you did before, but you get the functionality of having that tag in a different type of theme than you would have been able to do before. And because Legend in the Mist is contextual, that's really huge. That allows you to have kind of odd tags inside of themes they don't normally belong to. Like in your personality, you could have like was a sword master, you know, and be a sword master as a part of your personality.
Yeah,
So,
like
go ahead.
I think it is just all around for Legend of the Mist. It's why I think it's really important to approach every tabletop game with the with that mind of, I'm going to play this game today. Because I can't say I relate to the struggle of finding, like, well, granted, I have it sometimes with the video game thing where you play a game and you're like, well, now every genre that doesn't do this right, I'm gonna kind of sigh sadly and look at the one that did it the best. Because it really is just, when you find that game that does it really, really well, it's like, fuck, I wish everything kind of did it this way. But Legend of the Mist is very good at telling, like, the stories it's set out to tell and, like, the type of gameplay it's set out to game. Though, like, man, playing a crunchy combat game with Legend of the Mist would be very annoying. Because, like, I liked our encounter in our cool boss fight in Legend of the Mist. But, like, when you ask and how this would handle differently in a different game, I was thinking about it and it's like, man, yeah, it would be fun to, like, I said it a little derisively, like, yeah, the difference is we surround the Lich and beat his ass. But I was then thinking, it would be fun to surround a Lich and beat his ass. It would be kind of sick to do that. Because the Pathfinder curb stomp build is very fun for your party. It's like, it's always going to be that, like, the different play experience.
I don't know, so I disagree, right? Because you can have, like, tactical narrative combat. You can apply statuses and create circumstances, creating tags. Like, I agreed with you when you said it before, of just like, you just kind of like surround the Lich's body and just kind of beat him and just kind of roll and do that. And I found that, like, yeah, that's kind of what you would do in those games, right? Because at the end of the day, even though Pathfinder is a pretty good game where a lot of the things you can do are pretty justifiable to some degree, at the end of the day, you gotta do damage to defeat an enemy to take them out, and
yeah,
so you're
like,
just going
it's
to
a combat
attack.
simulator.
Yeah. And in Legend in the Mist, though, when you guys were doing it, I loved the fact that Suzanne was like disrupting this guy's, you know, trying to awaken his body again, you know, by turning into a ghost and possessing his body. That created an interesting moment that just doesn't happen in other games, and was kind of like beating him, but in a different kind of way than just beating his ass. And
oh, yeah.
when your character destroyed his armor, so that Devin's character could destroy his body, like in Pathfinder. Yeah, you can do debuffs. You can apply things like the frightened condition. I think it's called frightened. Or is it
Something
just
like
fear?
that.
I can't remember.
Frightened fear. It's kind of like the same thing.
Yeah, I just don't remember exactly what the condition is called. But you can apply like the frightened condition, right? But there's not like a lot of conditions you can do, and doing targeted things like destroying an enemy's armor, which to be fair, this boss had a modifier, a status that was making him hard to hit because of his armor that you guys could interact with. But that's just something in Pathfinder you just almost can never interact with unless like it's expressly a mechanic designed in the fight.
Yeah, like that is also like my point. Like the games just are different. They're set out to do different things. Like because like the fight we did with the Lich, it was cool. Like it was a very fun thing. I will say like when it comes to gameplay, it felt less of a fight and more like a puzzle that we were solving in the moment. A story puzzle that like as a story would handle it. Because if you actually were like to write our little game as a book, that is closer to how you would write that scene rather than like the Pathfinder way of, oh yeah, so he applied frightened and then he did a trip attack. It didn't work, but it still did damage. That is like the difference. One of them's a story, one of them is like more of a simulator combat thing.
Well,
but they do just inherently feel different to operate. And if you're playing Legend of Mist to play a game where I feel like I'm gonna have satisfying combat, it's like, well, you should probably approach it looking for something different. But if you approach like
I disagree.
I think the combat is just inherently going to feel different.
Sure. I'm not saying the combat won't feel different. I'm just saying you can have really fun, interesting combat in Legend of the Mist.
You 100% can. I think it's going to be satisfying in a different way. It's scratching a different itch.
In what way?
Because I think there is an itch that I scratch when I'm playing like a really like it's like the CRPG example for like
sure.
When I using my old thing of Disco Elysium and Wrath of the Righteous.
Right.
When I am in a huge battle map and through like strategies, ability management, and like going through everything, and I win the fight, especially if using my own intelligence, I win the fight with a lower amount of resources, it went really well. And like that level of satisfaction is super cool. It feels great. And then when I play something like Disco Elysium, or a similar tense situation that can occur, the gunfight that happens halfway through Disco Elysium.
Right.
Incredibly tense moment with a lot of really tense mechanical things that can happen. Literally, like a game-changing thing can occur in that moment. There is a different level of satisfaction when I get out of that with Kim at my side and we've like taken out the threat. There's a different satisfaction that feels more like a narrative satisfaction of I have got the best I got the best outcome of a story rather than I have used my mind and fully plotted out a tactical victory and set myself up for the next time that I'm not like resource down or it's like the mechanical satisfaction instead of the pure narrative satisfaction.
Yeah, I don't know. I think you're under a big misconception. First of all, the fight you guys did in Legend in the Mist, if it was done in Pathfinder, would also be a puzzle fight. Because there wasn't an active enemy fighting you. There's a body that was, slowly regaining its strength, or quickly regaining its strength, I guess, technically in the time scale. And so, like, if it was in Pathfinder, you would enter into a long hallway filled with, like, haunts and stuff like that, like traps, effectively, that you have to run through and roll saves against. And then you get up to the body, and then you have to attack the body and deal enough damage, and the body has, like, either as a reaction or on its turn would corrupt or deal damage to everyone around it, and whatever. But like in Legend in the Mists, you can have a scenario like active combat that is tactical, like it's not I told the story good enough and we won the fight. No, it's like I run up to the ogre and I slash it in the leg to deal a little bit of damage, and I'm also going to like give it the impaired status. And then the ogre is going to try to swing his club and bonk me really hard, because applying statuses, giving yourself beneficial tags, especially because the game has death spirals. If you become injured in Legend in the Mist, that affects your attack rolls because that applies a negative status to your rolls. So you have to come up with ways to overcome that somehow. When you start taking wounds, it starts making your rolls less strong than they were before. So you have to tactically come up with different ways of approaching the situation. Like, I'm not arguing that they're going to feel different. They are going to feel different. They're different types of combat scenarios. They do different kinds of things. But what you just described was more of just like a vibe than anything. Like,
yeah,
you just said
that's largely what games kind of are.
One was I moved on a grid and shot a guy, and that felt good. And the other one was I made some skill checks, and there was like this big narrative element to it. But like, what? Tell me, what is more fun about the tactical grid style, like mechanically or anything? Which is more fun about that?
I mean, I don't even think I would say one is more fun than the other. I would argue it is a different style.
Then tell me how it's fun in comparison.
See, thinking about it, it's like the other comparison I keep hitting in my head is if I wanted to play a cool mech combat game, and the decision was to run this in Lancer or Legend in the Mist.
Sure.
We could do it in Legend in the Mist. But like Lancer hits differently. Because it is inherently, there is just the vibe of it is a battle grid. We are playing this out like a strategy RPG. Sure. You're taking your turn, you're taking your actions, you're created your build. There's a set like way, essentially like you have this character in front of you. And the problem you are solving is how do I solve this problem in the way that hurts me less, wastes less resources with this constrained system I am operating in. I am allowed these types of actions, these type of sub-actions, and these types of movement. Legend in the Mist has a lot more of that nebulous, like, I have these tags. I can interpret them in different ways. I have the different contextualizations I can make in the scene, justify things however like we can come up with, and I can come up with really interesting out-of-the-box solutions. And I think if you ran both types of combat, even like back-to-back, I think Legend in the Mist, you could tell a very satisfying narrative, super sick, like basically cinematic story combat. You have the thing that you would read in a book. You have the thing you'd watch in a movie. And then if playing in Lancer, it is that vibe of like, I feel like this is a lot more video gamey, like strategy game. And sometimes I'm in the mood for that. Like I'm in the mood for the crunchy thing where I feel like I'm constrained by the system. The system is the only things I can do. And I'm playing at a system that is telling me no. And then I'm playing in a system like Legend of the Mist that's telling me yes and no but. They're different feelings. It is inherently, I'm saying there are different vibes. Because largely that's just kind of how a lot of games and art hits. A lot of times it is literally just a vibe. It feels different.
Okay.
There's the mechanical differences of like, I'm playing a Pathfinder and I'm playing a D&D. One is better than the other, clearly. But I think also if you're playing it with like the setting and all the stuff built into it, there is a vibe difference.
Yeah, and I mean, like, again, I understand that, right? It's more of like, so let me tell you what I feel, right? How I feel about the differences of gameplay, and maybe this will help contextualize what you have to say. So in Lancer, what's fun is I like looking at my weapon stats. For instance, like messing with the tags, seeing the different like explosion radiuses, and I like how in Lancer sometimes on your turn you might not like do a lot. Maybe you move into position, right, to fire at a square because you have like the numbers, the math. You know, you have your grenade launcher or whatever. And so you set yourself up so that when the enemies move into a spot, you can explode them. And there's that mechanical difference of you're playing almost like a competitive board game against someone else. and it's that mechanical, like, you're both playing the same game, quote unquote, and so there's that level of fun from that. Where in Legend in the Mist, you could, again, like, you can do roughly the same things. If you wanted to get in position, that can be a beneficial status that you can give yourself. And you can move yourself, narratively speaking, into a good position so that when the enemies move, or, you know, when someone procs an enemy move, you could say, okay, now I'm going to attack them with my explosion weapon. But at that point, it's no longer I'm playing a competitive game, because enemies don't have their own turns in Legend in the Mist. They only do things as consequences of other players' actions. So we're not competing against the enemy bots. It's just they're reacting to what I'm doing, kind of stuff. And so that tactile feeling of the enemies having their own actions, doing their own things, and just like the fun of being able to place explosions on a grid or have areas of effect, you know, working with sight lines. You don't have to worry about sight lines in Legend in the Mist, for instance. It's just not a thing unless you dictate that it is so.
Unless you like set it up like, hey, we're gonna make a really in-depth, crunchy battle grid for Legend in the Mist. Because I'll say part of this is the difference of feeling of like, because if we did battle maps in Legend of the Mist, it would be kind of a situation of, oh, nice, an on-screen representation of like what we're doing, but it wouldn't feel as useful except to have a mental image of like what are the threats and what do I need to deal with. Where instead, when you have a battle map for something like Pathfinder or Lancer, it is like, okay, sight lines, cover, I have this exact amount of movement that I can do. So if I want to move into this better position, fuck, that puts me in line of sight of this guy. That opens me up to these attacks. I might be able to tank that because the turn after that, I can do this thing. I think there's that level of like competing. Competing is a good way of putting it.
Yeah,
that's how it feels.
And also, like, you can interact with a map in a tactical game, and you can't do so really. I mean, you can and you can't in Legend in the Mist. In Legend in the Mist, it's more of a narrative quality than it is a mechanical one you're dealing with.
It would be a thing of like in a tactical, like a game like Pathfinder and Lancer, if I'm looking at the battle map, the things on the map, I'm stuck to that. That is how I'm operating it. In Legend in the Mist, I think is one of those games where you could introduce new elements of the battle map, like based off of the characters and role play and like decisions in that moment. You can of course choose to do that in a very tactical game. I think it's good to do that. I think it's good to promote your characters and your players to actually think outside the box in a very tactical setting and like add themselves to part of a scene. But it's like, it is less of a battle map that I'm planning around and working around, and more of, oh, this is a really nice visual representation of what we're doing, which is nice because I always appreciate that because I love having a mental thing I can look at. It helps me picture a scene better.
Yeah. And so, like, again, like, that's why, like, I was getting a little frustrated when it's just like, okay, but why? Because it's just like the vibe. It's like, yeah, but they're both storytelling vibes, right? Even though I understand personally, right, more or less what you might be getting at. When I'm trying to ask questions, you know, it's hard when they can't elaborate. But yeah, I understand, right? There is the difference of moving on a battle map. Interacting with a battle map in general is just a different game feel and has its own elements. And the gaminess aspects of some narrative games, or of narrative games, tabletop RPGs are fun to interact with. I don't disagree. It's not like I'm saying I want to only play Legend of the Mist forever. But for me, the reason why I play a TTRPG is for the combination of narrative and mechanics. We've talked about this plenty of times. Otherwise, it's just like, okay, why would I want to play Lancer? It's like, well, I feel like I'm more in the mood for a board game, you know? I'm more in the mood for a tactical board game than I am for a narrative TTRPG experience. You know what I mean? Same thing for Pathfinder. It's just like, Pathfinder, it almost is, in comparison to Legend of the Mist, or Legend in the Mist, feels way more like a board game than a narrative TTRPG, even though they're both TTRPGs. But when Legend of the Mist has every action and every part of it just tying back to your character's story and being something that, like, I'm doing this or I'm succeeding in this because of my character's story rather than because of the stats on my character sheet, it's hard for me to be like, I want to play a TTRPG and want to pick something that's less narrative inherently in almost every way. Even though you can still tell good stories in Pathfinder. But you're telling a good story while playing a really good board game, more or less.
It's the difference of, like, there's a way of having it so the game is expressly giving you tools to do the thing you want to do anyways. That's always my perspective, where I'm always like, man, it's rewarding me for the thing I was going to do regardless. Right. That's always fun. I love that. And, like, it hurts because I think the fix for Pathfinder, genuinely, it would just improve things so much more, is if, god damn it, can we please have non-combat feats?
Yeah.
Just more. Can we have more, like, roleplay feats? Even, like, every level or two, we get a roleplay centric feat? That'd be really sick.
Well, they just need to add more skill feats.
Yeah, they just need more skill feats, and maybe, like, that would honestly help things. They want to have it be a combat sim, they want to have it be this roleplay thing. You 100% can, and, like, I don't think there's anything stopping us from telling, like, the same level of story, that, like, immersion, everything that we have right now in Anima, that we're having in Legend of the Mist. It just will mechanically feel different. And it's so easy. Just give us more skill feats, please. Like, oh my god, that's all I want. Give me ways to express my character outside of combat. Like, I love Pathfinder a lot, but we're inherently setting up for a game that is like, we are going to solve the problems through violence. Like, basically every single time. And that, granted, that violence is so damn fun. Legend of the Mist, we can show up and, like, do a lot more extra options. I feel like in Legend of the Mist, I could more satisfyingly talk the final boss down than I could in Pathfinder.
To me, it seems like you just don't think Legend of the Mist has good combat. It just seems like that's the vibe you keep pushing.
That's not the vibe I mean. It's more like, I think it's an inherent gameplay difference. Because each game is trying to do something different from its design.
Right.
And, like, I don't think...
the need to express that is kind of, like, relevant to that. But we're getting a little long in the tooth here, and I know you got to get ready for work and everything, so...
True.
We'll...
I'll leave it at just... I'm not saying Legend of the Mist is a bad combat game. I'm just saying, if you design a game that is a combat sim, it is... Yeah, I'm playing Pathfinder to be a satisfying combat sim. I'm playing Legend of the Mist to be a really satisfying narrative experience. Yeah. Both are just different vibes you're showing up to the table with. You can't, like, each problem you approach in each game is going to be different based on the tools it gives you. And I wish Pathfinder had some of the Legend of the Mist tools.
Yeah, but, like, and maybe we'll just have to do more combat things in Legend of the Mist to really get the vibe across. But I think you can have very satisfying combat in Legend of the Mist. It's just less interacting with the battle grid and more telling the story in doing so. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Adding this, because the tags you can add, the statuses you can add, again, your character ability to destroy the enemy's armor to make him more easy to defeat is just something that is fun. Like, combat wise, it's fun. It's fun to have the ability to interact with the story in a way you just have a hard time doing in other kinds of TTRPGs.
It's way cooler than every other rules-light combat I've experienced, because in that one, the thing is they say that they're trying to do what Legend of the Mist does. In reality, it's just a very basic, like, okay,
different type of skill check, yeah.
There's a health bar, I make the attack roll, and I deal damage. So that's literally all this is. Like, it's a watered down D&D, like, Pathfinder combat system. You're just saying it's more narrative. Like, that's all you're doing.
Right.
But, like, Legend of the Mist is the first time I've done it where I'm like, oh, you're actually succeeding at the thing you said. I'm really happy about this.
Yeah, because, like I said, the status conditions can do a lot of very interesting things. Like, you know, if you were fighting, like, a bigger undead, Slug could try to control the undead versus trying to destroy it. and that would
Yeah.
be its own kind of like wound condition would be controlling it, but it has a different story implication because once Slug does control the creature, then effectively Slug could have a temporary companion, you know, which is fun and you can't really do in games like Pathfinder, for instance.
Unless your GM says shit, I guess.
Yeah,
like,
right,
and just
unless
kinda
they go
allows
out
it.
of their way.
But there's not a part you could open up to in the book that says if your player tries to control the big undead, like there's not a part for that, because a game like Pathfinder needs that. A game like Legend of the Mist doesn't.
Well, okay. So technically you can, because there are ways to control dead in Pathfinder, but
Yes.
it's just a little less open. But anyway, that's gonna be it for us today. Interesting topics for sure. And at one point, I'll probably stop talking about Legend in the Mist. But I'm learning so much from the experience, and I just want to talk about it because I think it's interesting. And you know,
I mean, it's
always
already in my top 10 list of tabletop games. Like it easily just slotted right in.
I mean, for me, it's like in my number one slot until I find a reason for it not to be anymore. And it's like not because I necessarily think it's the best. I just keep running into this situation of I can't, like, it just does everything I want it to do, you know?
I think you're hitting the same thing that's me with the Fantasy Flight Star Wars game. I don't think it's the mechanically best thing, but that is a game experience where I'm like, everything I want. Like, you're just giving me everything I like in a tabletop game? Yes, please.
Yeah, but like I'm trying literally to be objective about it, right? Like
Yeah.
I'm looking at it from a position of someone who's been in the hobby for a long time and done it for a long time. It's not about the experience. It's not like I've had a big experience in this game yet. I haven't played it that long. And I've mostly only played it by myself, you know, only with a few times with you guys. But for me, it's just I keep running into these situations of when I compare it to things like Pathfinder, it makes the things I'm doing in Pathfinder just more narrative and relevant to my character. And the things that the tags allow you to do because of context just allows you to play the kinds of characters I want to play. Because like the problem with like games like Pathfinder, D&D, whatever, is you're kind of constrained by the classes that exist. You can't play a class that doesn't exist in those games, right? So if you want to play a character that's kind of like a class but slightly different, it's very hard. But in Legend of the Mist, you can do so. One of my allies in my game is like a puppet master. There's someone who has like a bunch of autonomous little puppets. And Army of Puppets is one of their tags. And I'm like, oh my god, that's such an interesting tag. Because what can you do with an army of puppets, right? Like, there's a lot of contextual things that are very interesting. Right now, they're watching a particular site for this bad guy to show up. And they've applied like the on watch status to the scene so that if anything happens, they'll know or are likely to know because of the status. And that's interesting, mechanically speaking, right?
Yeah.
Mechanically speaking, that's interesting because in order to do that in Pathfinder, I have to essentially use a familiar, but one familiar who might not have really good stats because it's a familiar, you know, and I can't summon multiple familiars really.
At least Anima has a puppet combat rule, but
anyway,
because I think it is that different, you know, like last bit, it is like that's a fun way to put it, because I think in Pathfinder, like games like that, when you make something that's against type, it's like kind of novel. It's just kind of like, you found a way to make this work. Like I have a build I will play at some point, which is my wizard pretending to be a fighter, that I think is really fun mechanically, very cool, and and like the thing I'm happy about is that it utilizes a lot of spells no one really uses.
Yeah.
Because why would you? But it's like a arbitrary constraint, and I found a way to make this character not just like suck ass.
Yeah.
But if I made this same character in Legend of the Mist, it's then I'm able to do this without the constraint. And like now it's just like, fuck yeah, dude, you're like a spell sword? That's sick as hell. Here's what my thing is. And it's like, hell yeah, brother. But in Pathfinder, like you're playing within the constraints, and like and if I have a lot of moments where I look at a fighter and that maybe they're in the same game, I'd be like, damn, I am just a wizard pretending to be a fighter. In Legend of the Mist, I don't think you'd have that like negative comparison because you're not crippled by playing against type. in that game because hey, the type is whatever you want it to be.
And to be fair, I think it is fun to try to play a more rigid game unconventionally. Like anti-meta builds is a huge thing in things like League of Legends and everything like that.
Yeah.
And they only exist because there's kind of like a meta and a proper way to play. So
yeah,
that's a thing, but that's more of a gamey thing than a narrative thing. And but anyway, that's gonna be it for us. Thank you all so much for watching. Alex, anything you want to leave us off with before we end for today?
Go sub to my channel. It's Glue Boy. Go watch and share my werewolf video. I'll be gone for like a month.
Okay. And for me, it's going to be much the same. I will release a Legend in the Mist video. I did record one, but I think I'm going to re-record it because I just got so excited and I just started like rambling and I need to cut it down.
Fall to me as like the representation of the common tabletop player base. Fall to the bias. Fall to the bias. Don't be objective. Just gush over the thing you enjoy. Slander the things you don't enjoy as much.
It's more just the excessive rambling. I could probably cut 10 minutes off of the video and still say much the same thing.
Yeah, I get you.
But anyway, I guess with that, we'll go ahead and say bye.
See ya.